For centuries, the story of the Filipino people has been written by outsiders, colonizers, explorers, and historians who left behind their own version of events. But beneath those surface-level records, buried deep within the mountains and jungles of the Philippines, lies a history so powerful and so forbidden that it was deliberately hidden from the world. This is not the story you were taught in school. This is the story of the tribes that carry the oldest secrets of the archipelago, and why their history was almost erased forever. Let's begin in the Cordillera Mountains of northern Luzon, where the Ifugao carved their world-famous rice terraces more than 2,000 years ago. To this day, UNESCO calls them the eighth wonder of the world. But here's what most people don't realize. These terraces are not just farms. They are living evidence of an advanced tribal society with knowledge of engineering, water systems, and astronomy, long before colonizers ever arrived. The Ifugao passed down their wisdom orally, through chants and rituals. And some researchers believe their traditions contain clues to migrations that predate written history itself. Then, there are the Aeta, considered among the very first inhabitants of the Philippines. Genetic studies show that they carry some of the oldest DNA lineages in Asia, dating back tens of thousands of years. Their tightly curled hair, darker skin, and unique features make them stand apart visually. But what truly sets them apart is their unbroken link to the earliest humans who first walked the islands. For generations, mainstream history either ignored or misrepresented the Aeta, reducing them to footnotes rather than recognizing them as living carriers of ancient human heritage. This erasure was no accident. By minimizing their role, colonial powers were able to push their own narratives of civilizing the islands when in truth, advanced societies were already here. Let's not forget the Lumad of Mindanao, a collective term for several indigenous groups that resisted conversion and colonization for centuries. The Lumad's oral traditions describe ancient migrations, land stewardship systems, and even early forms of governance that parallel what we now call nationhood. Yet how many textbooks dedicate more than a passing mention to these groups? How many school lessons dive into the possibility that these tribes had thriving political structures long before Spain set foot on Philippine soil? Instead, their history was pushed to the margins, labeled pagan, primitive, or backward. Why was this history hidden? The answer is simple: control. Colonial powers understood that erasing or diminishing tribal heritage would make it easier to impose their own systems, languages, and religions. If the people forgot their true roots, they would more easily accept the narrative of dependency and submission. And sadly, much of that legacy still lingers today. Many Filipinos grow up with more knowledge of Spanish galleons than of their own ancestors' sophisticated ways of life. But here's the twist. Modern science is now uncovering what history tried to bury. DNA evidence from Filipino tribes is revealing links to some of the earliest migrations out of Africa. Certain genetic markers in Aeta and other indigenous groups show connections to populations that lived in Asia tens of thousands of years ago, long before China or India became civilizations. This means the Philippines was not some isolated backwater, it was one of the earliest crossroads of humanity. And it's not just genetics. Archaeological finds such as the Calao Man in Cagayan prove that human presence in the Philippines stretches back at least 67,000 years. That's older than many famous ancient sites across the world. Combine this with tribal oral histories that speak of great migrations across water and suddenly a new picture emerges. The Philippines was not simply discovered by Magellan. It was part of a vast ancient story of human survival, adaptation, and ingenuity. Even the tools and languages of the tribes point to this hidden legacy. The Baybayin script, which is often attributed to late pre-colonial Tagalogs, may actually be part of a much older writing tradition influenced by trade and migration. Meanwhile, tribal languages contain words and structures that link back to Austronesian roots, shared across the Pacific, and believe it or not, as far as Madagascar. This all suggests that the ancestors of today's tribes were not just isolated farmers or hunters, they were voyagers, traders, and knowledge keepers in a network that spanned half the globe. So, why call it forbidden? Well, because for centuries, acknowledging this history threatened the narratives of power. Colonizers wanted Filipinos to see themselves as passive receivers of civilization, not as active participants in shaping it. Even today, there are attempts to minimize or commercialize tribal culture without really honoring its true depth. Many indigenous groups still fight for recognition of their ancestral lands, their rights, and their voices in a modern nation that sometimes forgets its oldest children. But here's where you come in. As a Filipino, or even as someone simply curious about the Philippines, you have the power to help rewrite the story. Every time you learn about the Aeta, the Lumad, the Ifugao, the Mangyan, the Manobo, or the countless other tribes, you're pushing back against centuries of erasure. Every time you share their music, their art, their wisdom, you're proving that this history is not gone, it's alive. Imagine if every Filipino child grew up knowing that their ancestors were among the first voyagers to cross vast oceans, that their tribal heritage connects them to some of the earliest humans on Earth, and that their land has always been a center of innovation and survival. Imagine the pride that would ignite the confidence that would grow. This is not just about the past, it's about shaping the future. The forbidden history of Filipino tribes is not forbidden anymore. The world is starting to listen. Scientists are uncovering the DNA evidence. Archaeologists are unearthing proof of ancient migrations. And more Filipinos are reconnecting with their roots, realizing that their identity is not defined by colonization, but by resilience, depth, and continuity. So the next time someone asks where Filipinos come from, don't just mention Magellan or Spain. Tell them about the Ifugao and their engineering genius. Tell them about the Aeta and their ancient DNA. Tell them about the Lumad who preserved governance structures in the face of invasion. Tell them about Calauman, about Baybayin, about Austronesian voyages, because this is the real story of the Philippines, the story that was hidden but not destroyed. And if you're Filipino, remember this: you are living proof of survival. Your ancestors endured colonization, erasure, and forced forgetting, yet their blood runs in your veins and their wisdom echoes in your culture. That is something no one can take away. That is the forbidden history finally breaking free.